Welcome back to Footy Parlor. I'm your host, Federico Pravettoni, and in this 10th episode marking 1 year from the start of the podcast, I'm joined by Jeske. Court is the president of Echo Soccer, a multi-strategy investment firm which controls Oklahoma's professional soccer team as part of the ownership group. Previously, Court was the chief commercial officer at the United Soccer League, and he's also held senior executive roles at Nashville Soccer Club and Major League Soccer. Thank you, Court, for being with us today. How's everything going with you?
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on your 1 year anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, Gord, I would like to start from the present time. I know that you've been into this position with Echo Soccer and Oklahoma's professional soccer team for almost a year now, since you started in August of 2024. You are from Oklahoma, and you also studied there. So it's kind of like a coming back, kind of closing the circle for you after having spent a lot of time building and growing soccer around the United States, but also with international experience at Major League Soccer in international business, and also being a FIFA Master alum. So I'm just wondering, how has this period being working in Oklahoma's professional soccer team been for you so far?
Look, it's been fantastic. You summed it up well, that I've been so fortunate to be a part of rapidly growing soccer verticals in this country, whether it be US Soccer Federation, almost a decade at Major League Soccer, or then the founder of Nashville SC, that you know very well from your time there in Nashville. The chance to have all the ingredients in one place that we have in Oklahoma City. We've got the right ownership group. We've got the right location for a downtown stadium. And we've got one of the last major markets in the country without professional soccer right now. Mm-hmm. So we all know how well it's doing. What a joy to be able to do this and apply the skills, the connections, the acumen that I've been able to pick up along the way back in a place that you're so familiar with because you're from there.
That's awesome. Talk a little bit about this project, because it is a little bit different maybe from some of the other ones that you've been a part of. You mentioned Nashville SC, where you were the founding CEO, and that was a club that essentially was started from the ground up, being an amateur club. Then that became a professional team while you were there, first competing in the USL, and then after you left, becoming competitive team in MLS with the biggest soccer-specific stadium in the US and Canada. On the other hand, Oklahoma City's professional soccer team, OKC For Soccer, has competed professional soccer before. So it's a relaunch. It's a return for them. Talk about how Oklahoma City differs from your previous projects, both as a soccer project, but also as a city and as a community.
Yeah, great question. So as you mentioned, there was a previous iteration of professional soccer. And that's not uncommon in this country or even around the globe, that over the span of time, you have clubs and franchises that come and go. This one in particular had a very great ownership group. They did a lot of things right, and they really made some positive inroads in the community. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic and the stadium situation, that it was essentially an unplayable stadium, they had to close their doors about 4 years ago. And so that gives us an opportunity to start from scratch, right? Not that the fact that there wasn't work done before, or there wasn't, kind of a connection with the soccer community, but now's a great chance to raise expectations. That group and our group have both done a lot of work on the downtown multi-purpose stadium, which will have other things besides soccer, but really will be a home for professional soccer for men and women both. We also are going to have a fresh brand. And it's got nothing to do with the OKC Energy having a bad brand, but it has everything to do with the new opportunity that is in front of the marketplace and in front of this country, really, as it relates to the growth of soccer in the future. And so we want people to have a very forward-looking, high expectations for what pro soccer can become. So that's why at this moment we refer to the club just simply as a movement that is called OKC For Soccer, OKC as football. But in the coming months, we will announce a new men's brand, imagery, et cetera, that people can really get behind as we move forward.
That's great. The standards have been really, really high for this Oklahoma City team. I noticed you've brought in to develop the team crest renowned designer. Many, I'm sure, will remember the 2018 Nigeria World Cup jersey, as well as bringing in a very big architect in Populous. Talk about this as well and the development that is going to happen in the next few months as you guys roll out the team name, and the official crests, and essentially just the build up toward launching the team in 2027.
One of the key tenets we have, along with my co-founder Christian Kennedy, who's our principal at Echo Investments, is our belief that this club, this movement, should compete at the highest levels. That doesn't mean the highest levels of USL. It doesn't mean the highest levels of MLS. It means the highest levels of global soccer, right? And so I believe any club should aspire to represent their city on the world stage. You know, we've got some very good competition or friends and neighbors in the Oklahoma City Thunder of the NBA,
Mm-hmm.
right? That are currently playing and looking for a spot in the NBA Finals very soon. But they represent the Thunder on a global basketball stage. We're here to represent them on a global soccer stage. So when we started this movement, we wanted to make sure that I brought in the best of the people that I know from around the world. So you mentioned a rebrand with Matthew Wolf, one of the best designers in the game, not just soccer, but has done the Minnesota Twins, the LA Clippers, LAFC, that iconic LA and wing, as well as you mentioned the Nigerian national team, the French national team jerseys. He's got so much experience and really seems to hit on all levels. He's going to help us come up with a brand and an identity that represents us properly globally. That's one. Two, once you've got a brand, well, what's going to be their home, right? So we have had quite a few announcements already in the first 9 months with people like Populous, the stadium architects, or Legends, which for some of the listeners may or may not know is a collaboration between the Cowboys, the Dallas Cowboys, and the New York Yankees, right? Clearly the best in terms of sports world monetization. Why not bring them in and be partners on this development to make sure that we are thinking about this on a global scale, right? There is great community opportunity in Oklahoma City. There's great opportunity across the state as the economy is booming. But now, how do I bring those two worlds together of elite level decision makers and brands in the sports world and combine them with that local, state, national, and international opportunity? So that's what we're going to do. We pledge, Federico, we will not be defined by any of the leagues that we play in or content that we have. We're going to focus on the acronym that matters most, which is OKC.
Absolutely. And there's two, you mentioned the global events and bringing that mindset. There's two huge events that will be coming to Oklahoma being an Olympic city in 2028 with softball and canoe slalom, but also FIFA has recently added OKC as an option for team-based camps. Talk as well about the meaning of Oklahoma City to be involved in these huge tournaments and how that fulfills the vision that both you and the management at Echo are trying to fulfill in the next few years.
Yeah, well, this is where, fortunately, my connections in international soccer and working through the FIFA Master Alumni Association and that kind of 20 years of experience really helped. But credit to everyone that as we sat down as a group, the OKC For Soccer Committee, in 2025, we knew that we would not be able to host World Cup matches in 26. That ship has sailed, right? That's already happening. But we did know that Dallas, about 3 hours down the road, or Kansas City, 4 hours up the road, would be very proximal to what we're doing. We also know that we're in the center of the country, and there are also markets like Houston and Atlanta and Guadalajara and Monterrey and Mexico City that are all within about a 3.5 hour flight distance. So we have the advantageous location. How do we get our name out there, that we could be great hosts. So we went through that process with FIFA, worked very collaborative with them. And then we just stumbled on, not only will we use our professional training environment, which isn't being used, so how perfect is that? Um, our team won't start till 27, but we will use that for one team, but then also the University of Oklahoma and probably one or two other spots will be listed. So at the end of the day, being able to bring the excitement of the World Cup through a team base camp is really important for us. We won't make the final decision. You know, teams will do that, and the
Mhm.
draw will do that. So some of it is out of our hands, but you can't be considered unless you do the work on the front end. So that's what we committed to do. We committed to competing in the global game, ensuring that we are players in it. And so that means, some days we'll work with a local community center, and the next day we might be calling the chief commercial director for FIFA to have him think about us. So you have to do it at all levels, right?
Of course. And we already talked a little bit about some of the initial stages of since you came into the process of building that club going into 2027. I want to explore a little bit more the topic of essentially starting a soccer club from zero, like you already did, in a way with Nashville SC. The game in the US is still very different in the aspect that compared to Europe, there's clubs that have been founded and created hundreds of years ago. So the US, in a way, has really have to catch up. But even in the last 30 years, incredible progress has been made. When you build a soccer team from zero, from scratch, because soccer is a very community-focused sport, and it's really about the history and the tradition. How do you go about that? What do you seek to bring into a club when you start such a project? And what does the team need to thrive as a business, but also for that to translate on the performance on the field?
Yeah, so I think you touched on it. Look, there are so many similarities between what we were doing in Nashville in 2016 and what we're now have the opportunity to do in Oklahoma City in 2024, 2025, right? Um, you have rapidly growing markets. You've got the sport of soccer with, infinite growth on the horizon. And then you've got some communities that are younger, more affluent, and more multicultural, primarily Hispanic multicultural, than the rest of the country, right? So, what we try to do most often as we build this club is listen. I think it's really important for any startup, whether you're in sports or another industry, um, to listen, right? And that sounds a little cliche to say, but some of our best ideas have come from the fans. Some of the best ideas have come from the mayor or the Hispanic leaders in town, the Native American leaders that we engage with, the African American groups that we deal with. Until we really can sit and understand what they need out of a club, we can't be the club that best represents Nashville or Oklahoma City, right? So I think when you build that trust from day one and truly listen, so many sports teams get it wrong and they show up when they need something. I use the example all the time, but calling um, a Hispanic group or leader when it's Hispanic Appreciation Month, right, or Hispanic Heritage Month, and saying we want to do $2 tickets. That's not authentic. That's a sale, right? So we've brought all these groups to the table. We brought them to the table in Nashville. A lot of people involved, but really, if you listen at the core, you can then build the club that you need, whether that's the brand and the imagery, or whether that's the ticket pricing, or whether that is the style of play on the field, right? It's all going to be very reflective of your supporters. And I mean that more than just the crazies on the end of the goal and the end of the pitch, but with ultimately when these clubs reflect communities, people start thinking about it in a we versus a they, and that's when you've got the ingredients for success.
When talking about the history of soccer in the US, the game went through a lot of ups and downs during the years. What maybe specific mistakes might have been made in the building, of a team back then compared to maybe now? Now there's more history, there's been more there's more of a track record as well, for you to start Oklahoma City and look at what worked and what didn't work for Nashville. What do you think might have not worked in the past for the game? And do you think the soccer movement in the US is learning a little bit along the way into what works and what doesn't work as the game looks to find its identity in the United States?
Yeah, look, such a great question. And yeah, I'll take my historical context text back to 2001 when I started working for the Kansas City Wizards, who shared a stadium with the Kansas City Chiefs. And at that point, Arrowhead Stadium was about 82,000 seats. Federico, there were some days where we were announcing 3,000 and 4,000 people in the building. So you can imagine how that atmosphere was and how it felt, right? Um, what I will say is any kind of lessons we've learned or even taught ourselves, in my case, because I've been around a long time, um, we were also the beneficiaries of any failures, right? Or because an idea was tried or a market invested in the sport, but ultimately it didn't work. That doesn't mean that just goes away. Like that investment ultimately compounded and proved to be very fertile ground for others to try things in, right? And so I see it as kind of this constant, very slow progression with peaks and valleys along the way. But there are a slow progression up in terms of the growth, the understanding, the professionalization of all that we're doing. Um, no doubt, as we sit with the mayor and city council and other leaders in Oklahoma City, we can point to other success stories like Nashville, like Colorado Springs, like Louisville, like Austin, that show that, hey, if your community doesn't have a pro soccer team yet, men or women or both, you're kind of behind the game now. This is no longer is pro soccer going to survive? It's how big can it be? That's kind of the world we're in and the macro factors that we have going. So I think you're right that there's been a lot of lessons and um, wise investments. Some investments would be handled differently, but at the end of the day, it's all led to this point we're at. And I think if we've experienced, let's say, 2x growth from 2000 to now in those 25 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say we've doubled the market size. It's probably more than that. Whatever we've done, that same amount of growth you're going to see between now and 2031. There are so many major events coming. Obviously, we've got the Club World Cup and the Men's World Cup, but you've got the Olympics, right? That will have a footprint in Oklahoma City, like you mentioned. The Women's World Cup in 2031. We're going to have that same growth in the next 5 years as well, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's a great buildup. I mean, and also a great continuing of that development for the game. I want to come back later to the how big can it be part, but I also briefly want to touch on the process that it's been for the United States soccer movement to grow in the last years. It's often been about trying to replicate what was working in Europe and, looking at the European model, just because that's the game has been around for so long in the country. And that's, straight where you look at. Europe is the focus for that. In the last few years, there's been talks about promotion relegation, which now has been announced that's going to be implemented in the next few years along in the first division for the USL. At what point do you think the US soccer movement might come to a conclusion of its own development and its own identity instead of continuing to look at what Europe is doing? Could the next thing for US soccer be the understanding of its own game here and the identity here?
Yeah, look, great question. And I would say I think that's already happening, right? I think you're starting to understand whether it's the Major League Soccer model that doesn't have promotion relegation, same thing with NWSL, or the slight tweak on it we're trying to take on at USL. Um, the US in this marketplace, 350 million people with more buying power than Europe. We're kind of having a march to our own beat of the drum, right? A lot of that comes from the schedule, kind of historical norms in terms of in the U.S. outdoor sports generally happen from springtime to fall time, right? And that's the way we're set up. Or if it's even got to do with the way our brands are a little bit different, right? Sometimes our brands are a little more um, Americanized, let's say. So yeah, I think we are. We've learned a lot from Europe, certainly on the field. I think Europe's learned a lot from us, and certainly off the field. Um, but at the end of the day, we will have our own brand here, and that brand can be different, can look and feel a little bit different in the global game than it does in Europe. And I think it should, if it's going to reflect kind of what our communities and our teams want to do.
Okay. So you think the next thing after, it used to be, you said, how is it going to survive? And now it's been about how big can it be? Could the next thing be really about developing the game and making sure it's in every major market? And from there on, the US will truly be a soccer nation because it'll have the community and a team in every major, but also smaller market.
That is one way that we can ultimately be successful is when communities, you can pick your size, right? But when cities, towns, communities, villages, whatever, all have access to play the game. And then furthermore, those that want to pursue it at a competitive or professional level can do that, right? So if you just look at our map here in the US, we have about 75 cities with what's called an MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area. We have about 75 cities that have MSAs of 800,000 or more, right? So just tremendous population, right? Right now, about 55, 60 of those have professional soccer. It might even be 60 or 65 now, right? There's only a handful left of those big major areas and communities that don't have pro soccer. Once those, and I'm speaking from a men's perspective, there's more work to do on the women's perspective. But once those have that representation, whatever league they play in, right, that becomes a really kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that, success will breed success. And you start having great players in markets like Oklahoma City of 1.6 million people that come up, they decide to train and stay and play with us. And then we, as a USL club, may sell them directly to Europe, right? And we, again, going back to the earlier point, we play on the global game. So I think that's how U.S. soccer reaches its potential is not anything the federation legislates, but really just the fact that all of our communities are represented by professional clubs for women and men. And, there's interplay between all of them at meaningful points.
Absolutely. To me, it's still mind blowing that a city like New York City only has a couple first division teams. Of course, when you compare it to maybe, a city like London, could the future also be about revisiting maybe some of the major markets and further develop in those once the smaller markets or, all major markets are taken care of?
It's a good question. I think it will grow as much as the opportunity and the market provide, right? So let us see how USL continues to grow. Let us see how the Super League on the women's side continues to grow. The established leagues like MLS and NWSL will have to make some decisions, right, in terms of their next growth steps. But I can see a world. I think of it this way: college football in this country is a massive business, right? So is the NFL. There's no question the NFL is the biggest sports business in the country, but college football is probably the second biggest. And if you think about it, the NFL operates in 32 markets and specific larger markets, and that's the brand of football that those people generally more experience. While college, and there's of course overlap, but college achieves their potential more in the 1 to 2 million market size, right? It doesn't change the fact that if I live in Oklahoma City, I could root for the University of Oklahoma, where I went to school, on Saturday, but also the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday, right? It's just all fandom of soccer. So I feel the same way that you can root for Oklahoma City's professional team on a Saturday, and Sunday morning you can wake up and watch Arsenal, which I do most weeks, right? Or Roma. Um, so I think it's about just making sure people are exposed to the game, giving them chances to participate, and then the fans will choose what brand of soccer they want to spend their time and energy and ultimately dollars into.
One major difference between launching Nashville Soccer Club and relaunching a team like OKC for Soccer is that OKC for Soccer will be launched in 2027 into what potentially might be a new model with promotion relegation. How does that differ in the sense that now you're going to build a team that might right away compete into that new model, which is a first thing? It's a new thing across all US sports history because no promotion relegation currently exists.
It's a great question. Look, it's very exciting, right? The whole idea of, and I helped craft the pitch, but this is the first league of any sport in the U.S. that's truly adopted what is generally the global standard in
Mhm.
sports in each country, right? Is you've got kind of a pyramid system, and the cream rises to the top. So that's an exciting experiment, right? I think a very positive experiment for our league and our country. As it relates specifically to Oklahoma City, our answer is very simple, right? We are going to be the best club, and I'm not worried about divisions, sanctioning, anything. If we are delivering for our fans and we are delivering economically, we will have the resources to ensure that we are always in the top quartile, top third, whatever the percentage is for the league. Um, much like the Big Six or Big Seven in the UK, do not really worry about relegation, right? It of course exists, and there's mathematical possibilities where an Arsenal or a Man City could get relegated. But the reality is, if you are winning the game economically, you will win the game on the field as well, by and large. It's not always a direct correlation, but football ultimately, globally, is just a giant food chain where people are trying to climb over each other and be able to afford better players or invest in better facilities or the next technology, get more fans, etc. So we're really going to worry about ourselves and make sure that we have the commercial and economic resources to fund our coach and GM, right? And if we've got that done right, I have no doubt we'll be competing at the highest level USL offers, whatever that is.
What will be the major next steps into that process for you? Will it be the name of the team and the colors
Yep.
and the crest coming out this year?
Yep. So we've taken an extremely methodical approach to the first 2 years, right? So right now we're spending a lot of time on two things. One is putting the finishing touches on our downtown stadium, right? So we will break ground later this fall on a stadium that will probably end up being 10 to 12,000 seats, expandable up to 21,000 on the same site, so that as the demand grows, we can build onto our home,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that being publicly funded is a fantastic opportunity for us. We love working with the city of Oklahoma City and our maps for public financing mechanism we have in place. But as everyone knows, getting the stadium experience right is the first step for any club. And the home that you have is where people want to come, hopefully, 20 plus times a year. Um, so we're spending a lot of time on that. And the second thing, as you said, is the brand, right? Right now, it's a little bit clunky to have you were the energy, now you're OKC for soccer, OKC is football. What will you be? A lot of that clarity will come later this fall with Matthew Wolf when we announce the brand and the name and the imagery of the team, and really then first plan our roots in Oklahoma City. Then people can talk about us in a little bit more succinct way.
Okay. I have one last question for you around these 25 years that you spent in the business, both at the local and international level, league and club level. What's been most rewarding for you, and what are you most excited about for the near future for the growth of the game in the US?
A fantastic question. So, what I had, and I will say, I've enjoyed every day that I have worked in sports in this country. There are ups and downs. There's good days and bad days, but I am extremely fortunate that through the growth of soccer, we've created more opportunities for more people to do the same thing for years to come. That's the first thing, is that the journey has been nothing but enjoyable. The second thing is I just love the people, right? And working with people that you maybe got to, glean a little bit of information from 25 years ago when you were just getting into the business. And those people are still here. They're still in my phone. I still call on them as a resource. The people are what really has made that journey so enjoyable. Um, the last thing that I look forward to with Oklahoma City is ensuring that we deliver this club that has people proud, right? You want to make sure that they feel the club represents them. They expect it to have all the positive energy that exists, no pun intended, with what's going on in Oklahoma City, with what's going on in the state of Oklahoma in terms of growth and the economy and tourism and all the fun things happening. The Thunder, touch wood, pushing for an NBA title. There's so many positive things that I look forward to watching the community put their fingerprints on this new club in the process, and delivering something with greater expectations than they could have thought of when I started this job last August.
Well, thank you, Coach, so much for joining us. I'm really excited for this project and to see where it goes in Oklahoma City.
Well, Federico, thank you as always for your podcast, and to your listeners, appreciate you listening in. This has been a great interview, very thorough, and if we can help or be back on the show down the road, we'd love to continue.
Awesome. And thank you as always for joining us. Stay tuned by following Footy Parlor on Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much.